I will never, ever lead the song of the congregation. Welcome back to NoPro Worship. My name is David Wesley. So last week I took a little bit of time off from this teaching series and produced a new a cappella worship video. You can click on the link in the corner to check out the wonder of your cross. There will also be a link in the video description below and at the end of the video. 2 weeks ago, we talked about the importance of singing in a comfortable vocal range for your congregation. In addition to your spiritual preparation for leading worship with a congregation, it's important for worship leaders to recognize that the musical choices that you make can have an impact on people's experience worshiping God. You can facilitate people's worship, and you can also create barriers for people to sing. It's difficult enough for some people to sing in public as it is, but if you're putting songs into a difficult key or choosing songs that are hard to put in any key, you're making it that much more uncomfortable for these people to sing and engage in worship. People can listen to all sorts of Christian songs on their own time, but when it comes to congregational singing, it's something that we do together. So there will be compromises that we have to make a joyful noise together. Before I get going with a how-to video on how to choose keys for our worship song, I just want to give a shout out to my patrons on Patreon. These videos are made with your support. Thank you so much. If you were to do a Google search on how to choose keys for a congregation, you'll come across tons of resources that agree fundamentally on one very important rule. And this is called the C2c Rule. Now, it isn't a hard and fast rule like one of the 10 Commandments, but it is a very, very helpful guideline when you're choosing keys for congregations. The idea is that you may have a broad range of vocal ranges within your congregation, from your men from low basses to baritones to tenors, and your ladies from contraltos to altos to mezzo-sopranos to sopranos. There will be a range in the middle where they can all meet, not with equal levels of comfort, but they can do it. So the way that this is notated on a staff paper is between middle C and the next C above it. For ladies, it's within this range. And for men, it's this range. It's marked off the same way. So when a man and a woman are singing a melody together, that's how it sounds. The idea is that if you stick within the C to C range, except for exceptions under certain circumstances, you will be able to engage the majority of your congregation. Now, unfortunately, many songs these days go into a range that simply isn't possible to squeeze into this. Now, what you can do under these circumstances is to find the best spot for the song to sit so that most of the notes sit between C and C, and then figure out how best to deal with the notes that are kind of out of bounds. So I'm going to show you what I do for choosing keys when I'm leading worship for a congregation. So I'm going to open up Song Select. This is an online tool by CCLI, Christian Copyright Licensing International. Let me look up a song here. I will look up Forgiven. I'll click on that. It gives me a couple options. The first one is a chord sheet. Helpful if you're playing guitar or just singing. However, a chord sheet is not helpful in telling you how high or how low the notes are. Another thing that is not helpful for figuring out a key is trial and error during a practice. And I've encountered this many times. I've been told, oh, well, let's just try it in this or that key. Well, you actually can't do that because the average worship leader and the average singer on a worship team, because of their training and because of how much time they spend singing, your vocal ranges will be wider than the average person in your congregation. So even if you find a key that works for your worship team, it could still be too much of a stretch for your congregation. So there's another tool on here called a lead sheet. Now what a lead sheet is on staff paper, it gives you the melody in addition to the chords that the band can be playing here. So when I load the song up, it is put into the default key of A. If you were to listen to the original recording of the song, it would be in A. There's an original key for any song in this database, but if you're doing Chris Tomlin songs, for example, the original key will not be helpful because they're usually quite high because Chris Tomlin has a very unique tenor voice. So the first step when you're trying to find a key for a congregation is just to take a look at the lead sheet here and just see what the highest and lowest notes are in the key that you're looking at. So looking in the key of A, I just do a quick scan here. I'm not seeing anything lower than a C sharp, so we're good that way. Now, where we do encounter a problem is here in the bridge. We go up to a high D, just one note above the C there, and we also hit a high E there. So if we can get rid of those, that would be great, because it's going to leave a lot of people behind in terms of alto, maybe mezzo-soprano singers for the women, and the basses and the baritones for the men. So this tool allows me to then transpose. I will go down a whole step to G. So when I go to G, we do hit a little snag here that the lowest note is B, but that is actually just a half step below the middle C, and it's actually completely acceptable. It just, the C2c rule is a little more poetic than like the B2c rule. You know what I mean. Right, so we have our lowest note there. And when we go back to the bridge there, we can see that our highest note has turned into just the D, a whole step above the high C. And it only hits it once for the whole song, twice if you repeat the bridge. So that's not too bad. You might say, well, let's try to keep that high note within the C2C range. Let's go down another whole step to the key of F. All right, so we can see here that now we go down to the low A. Now when you're doing that, most people could hit it, but a lot of your true sopranos, well, they'll just lose every power, all the power in their notes. And even some of your male tenor singers will have some difficulty with that, depending on how much time you're spending down there. So it's not ideal. But that being said, it does bring that one note, high note in the bridge, into your C2C range. So you kind of have to balance between how many notes are being done at the extreme low versus how many are done at the extreme high. So let's take another song as an example. Hosanna, Praise is Rising, Brenton Brown, Paul Baloche. All right, so if you were to listen to his recording, he does the song in G. So again, same steps. I will look through and look for my highest and lowest notes. Right now, my highest note is a C, and my highest note now is a D, and that's as high as it gets. And it hits that a couple of times. And it looks like the lowest note is a C. So we're going from C to a high D. That's actually pretty good. It's an octave plus a whole step. So with this, because especially at the ending here, where you have repeating of the words Hosanna, Hosanna, even though that high C is theoretically within our range, it's at the top end of the range. And when you're holding that note, you're going to strain some people. So as much as the key of G would be great for playing on the guitar, if you're very considerate, you might drop this puppy down a whole step to the key of F. So your lowest note will be a B flat. You only hit that note once, I believe, in the whole song. But then when you do the chorus and you go to your Hosanna, you're only going up to, again, that high C. And when you end the song on the repeated Hosannas, Hosannas, with a bit of vocal strain in the previous key, it goes up to the B flat. So it's a little bit easier to handle for people. Now, let me show you an example of a song that really doesn't have any good key. Oh, praise the name. And you know what? I like the song a lot, but I will never, ever lead the song with a congregation for the reasons that I'll show you. Originally, this song is done in C, and C is the lowest note in the song, I know that. If we go through here, already right away you can see we're going up to a high D and a high E. And we do it again up here, high D and a high E, and again, and we even go to a high F, right? So right away we know that this isn't very good. So let me drop this puppy down to A. All right, already we're gonna have some trouble because now the lowest note is below below the middle C. So again, that might catch some people. And if it was just that one note, a little kind of throwaway note, not really a big deal. But we go back down there and we kind of land on there. So you have some people kind of that will have to growl those notes out. All right. And going through again, when you do the chorus, "Oh, praise the name of the Lord our God," we're going up to that high D again. And it stays up there for a number of beats. So you get a bit of strain. And again, we go up again to that high E. So some worship leaders in my church have done this song in G to avoid those really high notes. But then you get stuck going down to a low G. Your alto ladies might be okay with this, and your bass baritone men, but your mezzo-sopranos and sopranos and your tenors, which is a sizable chunk of your congregation, they simply can't go that low, and they'll be left out. All right, so this is an example of a song. You might be able to find a key that works for you as a worship leader, and you're going to leave behind a lot of people in your congregation. And another worship leader, say a female worship leader, could say, "Oh, let me throw that into F or E flat and go even lower," and they would sound great. But unfortunately, they would leave the majority of the congregation behind. All right, so this is kind of how I've done this up to now. I just want to introduce you to a little tool that I created that will actually make this a bit easier. Instead of having to go through and scan sheet music like this and having to have a bit of a guess of how much time you're spending at the extreme ends of the vocal range, I wrote a computer program that can actually do that for you. So I'm calling this for now the rangefinder, because it's kind of like the laser sight on a sniper rifle. You know, it helps you find the range to the enemies so you can do one shot, one kill. No guesswork. So basically, I have imported a bit of a database of songs here and inputted the melodies. And the first thing that happens when you load up a song, it'll tell you what the range of pitches is. So when we do, this is Hosanna, Praises Rising, that we actually already looked at. In the key of F, that pitch range tells you from B flat to C. The octave there just tells you which note of that name. And it tells you the average pitch, sort of the middle of the song. It tells you what percent of the song do you spend above that high C, and what percentage of the song do you spend below that middle C, right? And how many runs of high notes or low notes are there in the song? And then I'm still working on this part. There's a little numerical score that tells you how much your congregation is going to strain. And the further apart you go outside of that C2c range, the number of strain points goes up exponentially. So it kind of punishes you for not being friendly to your congregation. Now below here is a little thing, it's basically a histogram, which is it shows you all the notes that are used in a song, and it gives you a little bar graph and a percentage that tells you how much of the singing time in the song is spent on this note. Now this isn't based on strictly the number of notes, but the number of notes times how long each note is. So when it says that 24% of the song is spent on that B flat, it means that that's all the sum of the long and short notes on B flat adds up to 24% of the song. So that's a quarter of the song. So you can see here that Hosanna actually has a reasonable shape, because it spends most of its time in sort of the upper middle range, and it only kind of touches that highest note, and it barely glances that bottom note. So I'd say F is probably a safe key. Now below that, you have a pitch map that, instead of sticks and dots, as a friend of mine once said, you have a very visual representation of the ups and downs of the song there. And if there was anything that was in bright red, it means that it was quite out of range. So the other tool that I have here is that you can transpose this. So let me put that back into that original key of G. That's loading up. Oh, all of a sudden you see that there are 13 runs of high notes, which is including that high C and above. And that 31.2% of the song is spent in a high run. All right, and 3% of the song is spent above the high C. So you can see with the sort of brownish tint on the D5 there, that more of the song is spent outside of that comfortable green C2c range. And you can see that with the hosannas, that's where those come from. If we were to go a little extreme and go up to A, you see that this just gets worse and worse, and now 42% of your song is spent above that high C, all right? And you go up to that E, and 24% of your song there, 27% in total is, well, even that C sharp is added into there. So that's a lot of the portion of the song that's above. And you can see that turn red very easily. So let's go to that song that I said I would never lead, Oh Praise the Name. And it's in that key of A that if I had to, I would do it in. You can see just this wide range. It's 1.6 octaves. It goes down to that low A, and I don't even have room on my little mini keyboard to go up all the way. It goes up to that high E. And if you look at the pitch map, you know, you can see even in the course of one phrase, it's going up and down, and it goes into the basement there with those red notes, and then it screams up high with the red notes there. If you were to go in the original key of C, you could see just how much time is being spent above, at C and above. 33% of the song is above C, and look at all that red. So this tool is immediately a useful guide that shows you the consequences of choosing a certain key for a song. Now, just to give you a big comparison to the wide range of Oh Praise the Name, you can go to a great song called Nothing But the Blood. Check out my version if you haven't. The range of this song is, we call it diatonic fifth. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The whole song is contained in those 5 notes. So I could put this song in multiple keys and it would stay green. Unfortunately, if all of our songs were that simple, it'd get quite boring. So anyway, I am still working on this tool. There are a couple features that I do want to add to it. One of them is to be able to create a set list so that you can start to create some statistics for a grouping of songs, because like I said, that C2c rule, it is more of a guideline, but now that you know about it, you're responsible for knowing it. And when you break that rule, it's important that you do it consciously and recognizing that there's going to be risks and benefits to it. You might get more energy for singing a song higher, but then if it puts you into that dangerous range, if you're just licking that top note, fine. But if you're holding on to that top note for like 2 bars, forget about it. So with the ability to create set lists, you could see, okay, well, what percentage of this whole church service are we spending outside of range? Who are we stressing? And you could also create comparisons between different worship leaders if you're trying to evaluate how well everybody is doing in terms of keeping the congregation in a singable range. The other thing I want to do is create a little bit of a database so that in addition to the tools here, that there'll be links to videos as well. So as this becomes more developed, there may be a mobile app created. I might be approaching CCLI to see if they can get this integrated somehow into their database with a link, or vice versa, that I would be able to link to CCLI through this so that churches could access this tool. I'm not quite sure what I'm going to do with it, but I'm pretty excited. I think it's sort of a one-of-a-kind thing and will be very helpful. So anyway, next week I want to talk about some of the differences between traditional hymns and more modern songs in terms of the vocal ranges and some of the difficulties that can present for congregations. So I make these videos, these NoPro worship videos, because I believe that the church deserves leaders that grow. And my particular area of passion is in worship. So I encourage you to come back next week and keep watching for tips, tricks, and strategies and principles to help your worship ministry grow and mature and to serve your congregation better. So I hope to see you next week.